Well, that's a pretty wide statement to make. You just need to do a better job.
Yeah, I mean that's literally my life. I just need to do better.
Oh boy. Well, we've all been there. I think tonight, based off of feedback that we had, I am bringing back the timer.
Thank you very much. Yes, the timer. You know what? We need to bring back the timer just really for me, so I can have a word in edgewise. I mean, you guys.
I love that you're the one who
Bill and Keegan were killing it last time. What's that?
I love the fact that you're the one who brings that up every time. So is that really pot kettle or what?
No. They literally monopolized. No, I don't know.
Others bringing the clock back. He just beats us to the punch and say it's for me. So.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah.
Hi, Michael. Nice to see you again, my friend.
Good to see you, Kim. Good to see everyone. Nice to meet you, Bill and Morgan.
How you doing, Michael?
Nice to meet you, Michael.
Pretty good.
Okay. Yeah, let's do some introductions here. So first off, I'm going to kick this thing off for us. Anybody who is noticing the clock up here, if you're watching us live, you're watching this afterwards, we brought it back because things have a tendency to go off the rails pretty quickly here. We've got a lot of thoughts flying around. So we figured we'd try and keep things a little bit more organized. But as always, massive appreciation for anybody who's watching this and anybody who's tuning in. This is the Sports Roundtable series that is presented by the Unstoppable Mindset, which is a podcast talking all about mindset, sports, and all other sorts of stuff. And as always, we appreciate everybody being here. And tonight we have a full house. So we've got Kim Brady in the house. Say what's up, Kim.
Hi, everybody.
We've got Bill Dean in the house. Say what's up, Bill.
Good evening, everyone.
We've got Morgan Koth in the house. Say what's up, Morgan.
What's up?
And then we have our special guest of the evening. This is our first guest that we've had on the Sports Roundtable series live, is Michael Willet. I will do a small introduction and then turn it over to him to add a little bit more flavor to it. So Michael and I have had the pleasure of being able to talk on I think it was episode 106 on the Unstoppable Mindset podcast. And Michael is a former running back at the UCF Knights. And he is currently the CEO of Walk On Nation. And all I can say is amazing things about Michael. Incredible individual, the work that he's doing now and helping athletes in the game today. And also being a collegiate athlete. I can't say enough about him. I really appreciate you being here, Michael. I'd love for you to do a little bit of a self-introduction on top of that.
Once again, Keegan, you and these introductions, it's really hard to do a follow-up after that, but I definitely appreciate it. I didn't know I was the actual first live special guest, so I guess the pressure's on for me to perform, but it's fine. I'm a former athlete. I'm used to that. But to what Keegan was saying, I did play football at UCF from 2013, 2017. My senior year is the year we won everything, beat Auburn, got claimed national champions, all that great stuff. But that year was the actual year I had a career-ending injury, helmet to the quad, calcified to a new bone, so I have a new bone in my thigh. So there's that. So I technically am a superhuman if you look on the bright side. But all that led to me was creating Walk On Nation. Was all about athletic identity redefined, helping athletes realize that they are enhanced, not defined by their status, and helping them find who they are as a person outside of being an athlete. So that's a very quick summary of what I got, and I know we'll talk more throughout the podcast today. So I'm excited.
I love it. Well, tonight on the docket, we've got, obviously, if anybody who is tuned into sports right now, we're in the thick of playoffs, and we are in the finals of not only getting ready to do the finals for the NHL. The Colorado Avalanche already made it, and now we got to see who will be facing them from the Eastern Conference. But we've got Golden State and Boston getting after it also in the finals. So we've got the pinnacle of sports going on right now for both of those sports. And obviously you have plenty of other things going on with sports. You've got summer sports that are in full swing. You've got if you're a fan of football, obviously you've got summer training and all the news and all this other fun stuff that's going on. And you've got golf season, in full swing. So much stuff, and you have baseball going on, right? So like we are in an amazing time for sports. I think summertime and fall time, really from like the end of spring all the way through, I don't know, November. It seems like there's sports on 24/7, which is amazing if you're a huge fan. But right now, because we are at the pinnacle of the game for two different sports, I thought it would be really great to dive into performing when the stakes are really high. And this is obviously both within sports and business. So I don't want to limit anybody here from being able to talk about one side versus the other. If you have thoughts on one versus the other or both, please feel free to share them. So tonight, the first thing I wanted to really open us up with is having a conversation about whether the stakes being raised is, like championships and all this other stuff. If from our perspective, if it creates internal or if it creates pressure and where we believe that pressure comes from, right? Because everybody thinks there's so much pressure at this time. This is a pressure cooker. All right, well, what is the pressure and where exactly does it come from? I think that'd be a good way to level set and kind of ease into this topic a little bit. And as always, we're going to be going around the horn and everybody's going to be able to give their fair assessment on some of these things. I'm going to have the timer going, so we'll just be mindful of it. But let's kick it off with Kim. I'd love to hear your thoughts on pressure in the game. Where does it come from and why does it even matter?
Pressure, I think it comes from both internal and external factors. One, we have our internal belief system of our version of success, right? And then we have our external pressure of what is expected of us from those who've invested in us, right? So the more that we have people invest in us in their, especially when you're looking at professional athletes, right? The amount of pressure placed on professional athletes is a powder keg in many, many ways. You have the fans, you have your money, you have your coaches, you have your managers, you have your family members, you have all these things. But I think that both internal and external factors create an increase in pressure and what you define it as. And each person handles it differently, as we know, for sure. I didn't even take up my whole minute and a half.
That was a quick one. All right, let's go over to Bill.
Yeah, I would obviously agree, Kim, the internal, external. I think for us, I know one of the things we talk about is embracing the pressure. I mean, you go out for a sport that we're moving into the high school levels and college student athletes, you're a part of that because you want somebody to call your number, right? You want somebody to be on the field. And that embracing of it, for me, naturally, like you said, the postseason, but we really just focus on with our kids, like, yeah, it's there. And it's really a good thing. And we expect a lot out of you because we want the best for you, those types of things. But then just really getting into, each person's different. And so some individuals, I played with guys in college, you knew what they were doing in the restroom right before, ran out in the field, and then they were good. Other guys just kept it bottled up and sat in the corner. So however they deal with it, I think as a coach, I kind of take the challenge as really being able to connect with each athlete. And, if it needs to be an arm around to help them through a moment, if it's more of an individual that takes a little bit more direct input and feedback, from a coaching perspective, really being able to connect with your players. And then at the end of the day, they just go out there and perform. So love the pressure.
Absolutely. Michael, pressure. Talk to me about it. Where does it come from? Why does it matter?
I think piggybacking off what both Kim and Bill said, pressure just comes from external and internal. But I also think pressure can come from preparation as well. If you prepare well, then the pressure really doesn't get to you. You see that with championship teams, your greatest players. They prepared so well that it seems like they're just cooling the pressure. They got ice in their veins. And when you don't prepare the right way and these big events happen to you, then that's when the pressure, you succumb to the pressure. Just it's too much to handle. So I know when it came to us at UCF, we were playing against Auburn for the Peach Bowl and all that stuff. The pressure didn't get to us, so we were prepared. We knew better than anybody else what we can do because we prepared for it. So there was no pressure. It was going to the game of the game. Same thing going in life is life. You prepare for the right things, pressure doesn't really succumb as much as it would if you don't prepare.
Absolutely. Morgan, what are your thoughts?
I'm going to take Kim and Michael's extra time. Thank you very much. I'm going to just put that in my bank.
So you've got two 90-second segments.
Right after, I'm going to go right into what they said. Absolutely internal, external. And I'm going to piggyback off what Michael said. You don't rise to the occasion. You fall back to what you practiced, right? Because I remember just a time in rugby. I played sports all my life. There was a time in rugby at University of Connecticut. And I was a position called a fly half. So not only was I a quarterback, but I also kicked. They called the extra points. They weren't extra points, but I kicked also as well. And we were in a playoff with Brown University there, University of Brown over there, and right outside of Providence. And we were in that tournament, and we were for the championship or something like that. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was a kickoff. And you had to kick off from a certain spot on the field, and then you had to move, to where it was harder and harder and farther away. And so it was me versus another guy. You flip a coin. I'm trying to make this fast. I'm going to have to go over, Keegan. Just let me go over. You flip the coin. You flip the coin. There's a point to this. You flip the coin to see who goes first, right? I'm like, I'm going to go first. And my point is I practiced. I've been playing sports all my life, and we were ready for this game. We wanted this game, and I'm here alone, right? There's each team is on the sidelines, and there's a big crowd here too. And so I'm there alone in the field, and I'm nervous as hell, man. I honestly can't feel my body, right? But I kick straight through. I'm like, okay, because we were right in the middle. And there it was. The guy, the other team from Brown, he kicks it straight through. I'm like, okay. So we go to the left hash. And from a righty, a left hash, you kind of get that little hook. So it's not so bad. I kick it. I have confidence. I'm like, goes through. He kicks it, goes through. At this point, literally, it's hard for me to breathe. Right? I am so nervous, but I'm prepared and I'm ready. I'm like, okay, I get to the left hash mark, and from the left hash for a righty, it's kind of hard to kick. We're about the 25-yard line. So, I mean, it's not that far, but it's far enough. I kick it through, and I'm like, I literally can't feel anything in my body. I can't feel my leg. Everything in me is numb. I am nervous as hell. And I'm like, man, I don't know if I can do anymore. The pressure is starting to get to me a little bit. This guy kicks it literally 4 feet into the ground. The pressure got to him already, right? So I'm like, thank God, because I was like looking at him going, damn, I'm glad you didn't make it, because I wouldn't have been able to, I would have been me next time, right? My point is that I've been preparing and practicing, not say all my life, but I've been playing sports at a higher level, than maybe most kids, but not all kids. And I got to this level, and I was there, and I did it. But, and Michael was saying it like, yeah, they were ready, but you see it in the NBA. Right? You see guys that how are they, they're bricking a free throw and there's like 5 seconds left, right? There's like 80% free throw shooters and they're throwing air ball. I mean, it can get to everybody where they're feeling nervous, right? But it goes back to that preparation. I believe that so much, what Michael said, is that preparation and continuing. And you're not going to see Steph Curry throw up an air ball, and you're not going to see Kyrie. You're not going to see LeBron. Well, LeBron might throw one up. I mean, he's just bad at free throws. But my point is preparation is key, because those external pressures are going to come, and those internal pressures that you put on yourself are going to come. It's that preparation, I think, is key, and that's why it matters, because it's going to get you. That sooner or later, that feeling of where you're nervous and you got to throw up, it's going to happen to you when you get onto that big stage. And if it doesn't happen to you where you're not nervous, I'm not sure you're human.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, that was time well spent. I'll give you that one.
All right.
That was
Michael,
awesome.
Michael and Kim, use your time, man. I'm gonna use it again. I'm gonna bank it.
Okay, so my take on this, obviously, where pressure comes from, why does it matter? So, I think pressure comes from expectations. I think that's from my perspective. It's obviously when you look at pressure from an athlete's perspective, it, at least in my experience, it purely came from setting these winning results for myself, aka there's one way to win, there's one way to lose, and the expectation is if I don't do this one thing, then I'm choosing to not do that, and therefore there's one way to win, one way to lose, and all the pressure's on you. And why does that matter? Is because it is a box. When you're an athlete and you put yourself into the box of expectations, I've seen more careers ended from people setting these crazy expectations for themselves and they've created essentially a box in which they're able to perform or not perform. And they may have set a completely unrealistic box, setting themselves up to lose before they even get started. And then it's just kind of a ticking time bomb. And expectations is just this number one killer of dreams that people just have to be aware of in order to be able to find success and be able to break free from it and actually create win conditions for themselves that are greater than just one simple thing, which an expectation is usually only focused on one thing at a time. So with that, obviously the next part of this conversation that I would like to go into is some of the pressures that we've faced. So we just talked about where we think athletes face pressure from and why do those things matter. Like, I want to talk about some pressure cooker moments from ourselves, from our own worlds. And obviously, how'd you handle it? And then what would you have done differently if you could choose to do anything differently to deal with that? I'm going to go around the opposite way this time. So Morgan, you were on a roll, but now I'm going to put you on a timer.
Like, I just gave you my one. I'm gonna have to come up with another one. Man, you know what? There are so many times when there's been so much pressure, and you know what? That one that I just told you is the one that really was on my mind starting this conversation. So I'm blanking on other ones. But
well, what's one that you face today?
Pressure that I face today? My kids got COVID. You know, I've got 2 kids with COVID in the house. And you know what? They're fine. They're getting better, but that is pressure. Mm-hmm. That is a pressure that society has, you know, given us, and that's something we've been dealing with for a long time. And it's one of those things that I'm going to talk about, you know, a societal thing. I'll talk about myself. It feels like it's over, but it never is, and it's just constantly there in the behind the scene type of thing where it matters and it's disruptive and it puts pressure on us as a family because there's certain things that we want to do and can't do. My son's got basketball that, you know, he can't go to practice. He's got, you know, some camps going on and some things going on that he can't do now. There was an overnight thing that he can't do now. You know, he wants to train like he wants to, but he can't. And, you know, there's certain things that I want to do that, you know, I can't do. So, you know, that kind of pressure, I guess, is something that we have to deal with. And with that kind of thing, it's one of those things you just kind of take day by day, and you be optimistic about, hey, we're going to get through this and thankful that we're healthy as we are.
Yeah, 100%. Michael, what kind of pressure have you faced and how'd you deal with it?
Have a minute 30. Great. Pressures I face, I'll go more outside of, still a sport. The pressure I face is more one I put on myself from family, is just trying to live up to that golden child expectation that they put on me, not purposely, but then I put on myself for sure to make sure I live up to that standard. So anything from making sure I make it to the NFL, which didn't happen, or making sure I get my scholarship, which we talked about in the podcast prior, or all the other things that I put on myself is the pressure to be great and succeed and make sure I make it, because I have to be the one that everyone looks up to. So I put the pressure on myself that if I don't make it, no one makes it, which, as we all know, that's not the right thing to do, but that's the pressure I face. How I got over that is realizing that it's my life to live and no one else's. So whatever I do, I got to figure out who I am, because if I don't, I can't help the people anyway. All the people I want to help, I can't if I don't even help myself. So I really had to dig deep, figure out who I was. Took a lot of soul searching. It took a lot of quiet time, a lot of tears, but hey, it happened and I'm here now. But that's how I overcame that pressure, just figuring out who I was as a person and understanding that I have to focus on me before I focus on anyone else. Made it in time.
This clock is the greatest pressure we're facing tonight.
Hey, you know what? I was about to say that clock is
it's faster. It gets faster every episode. That's what we've learned. That's why we got rid of it for one, because it was creeping in too much.
I love it.
Bill, what kind of pressure have you faced? How did you deal with it?
Oh, let's see. I'm not going to really go to the glory days route, I don't think. I was thinking about that, listening to you, Morgan and Michael, and for me, I kind of connected to what I'm doing now for work and balancing that pressure and still coaching high school football, right? Like there's that constant focus of mental wellness, mental performance, preparation, self-care. But let's face it, when the lights turn on Friday night, we're winning, and so I just found myself with a couple of coaches the other day, a few of our student athletes, just looked like they were really dragging. And we broke down where they're at. You mentioned summer. We have young men and young women right now who are waking up at 6 a.m. for lifting or speed and agility. Then they're doing summer volleyball or summer basketball or both for girls' sports. Then they are playing softball or baseball. And then they have the real life, depending on what their situation is. And for me right now, that's really the pressure. Like, I want to live up to what I'm passionate about from a wellness perspective, but I don't ever want to lose sight or lose that fire to just win. So to me, I would say right now that's where I'm sitting with that pressure.
Yeah, absolutely. Kim, what pressures have you faced? How'd you deal with them?
Oh, I face them all the time. I think, let's talk about business, because when you are stepping into a new experience, athlete transition is something that Michael and I talked deep with the other day when he and I chatted, and I've reached out for assistance from all of you guys of helping me in crushing my business goals, right? So the pressure that I put on myself to succeed in my new business adventure and keeping myself focused and level-headed, and what am I going to do when, it's like that quote of put your goals in pen and write the steps in pencil, because you just never know what steps you really are going to have to take to achieve that goal and that mountain and that summit of that moment. And I think, putting that pressure on myself of taking the goal achievement differently now that I'm an adult. Instead of constantly chasing the goals and the money and all these other things, it's really focused on who can I help and how can I serve best those folks that want to work with, and what processes do I need to change? What do I need to do differently? What do I need to learn? Who do I need to connect with? And being much more open to the process of goal achievement versus the moving target of the goals. We all should have goals, whether it's a championship trophy and that's a new goal for the season or whatever those goals are. But for myself, the pressure has been internal always, and I get through it by asking for help.
Yeah.
100%. No, I couldn't agree with that more. And for me, when it comes to pressures that I've faced and how I've overcome them, I want to say to date, probably one of the greatest pressures I faced was, obviously I faced a lot of pressure as an athlete, like, whether it was high school or college, like you're always kind of have a spotlight on you. But one of the biggest pressures that I faced was when sports was over for me, the pressure of figuring out what the hell I do next. And I don't have a lot of time. Because college is it flies by in the blink of an eye. And I think all of us can attest to that. Like it's absolutely a blip on the radar of life. And when sports was over for me, trying to figure out how I start to not only refocus, find a new goal, find a way to get really good at that goal, and then push myself in order to be able to gain the skills, the knowledge, all these other things. And it seems like the craziest, shortest time period of time in your life. There is obviously there's a story here that I think at some point during this episode, Michael, you're going to have to share about, trying to figure out how you overcome that pressure of how you refocus yourself and keep the momentum going. Because as an athlete, we have to perform 100% all the time. It doesn't matter who you are, what you're doing. There's always that expectation to perform at a really high level. And if you don't put yourself in a good place to be able to do that, then you're going to falter and you're going to have a lot of problems. So that was the number one pressure I faced. And obviously the way that I got over it really quickly is getting outside of my own head, immediately becoming a sponge and tapping into other people who I thought were doing really well, so that I can try and get just a chapter ahead in one part of the book that was the next phase of life for me. That was the number one way that I got past it, is get out of my head and tap into other people. Just like that's what everybody here's here to do, is to help other people get out of their own head and tap into someone else to be able to move forward. I would like to move over and Morgan, I think this is a great topic that you brought up here is, and then Kim, you also have another topic that I would like to dive into as well. So I think we've talked a lot about expectations, and I want to really touch on, and I want to come to Morgan first, and I want to hear your perspective on this before we open it up a little bit more. But there's obviously, we have a lot of expectations on ourselves, and Bill, you can probably also touch on this as well. I think we all obviously could, but we all have expectations of ourselves. But then there's also this side of expectation that we have for other people, this pressure that that we put on other people, whether they're your teammates or in business, they're your coworkers, or if you're in a relationship, maybe it's your significant other. There's an expectation, there's kind of an agreement that either might be spoken, unspoken, but there are these expectations of other people. And obviously that carries a big impact. And Morgan, I know that this is something that I think you could probably touch on well. And I'd love to hear more about your thoughts on kind of the expectations of others that we hold for other people and kind of the pressure that can create.
Oh, it's huge. I think Michael really touched on it when he was talking about his own personal experience, about the expectations of being that golden child, expectations of having others, almost the weight of them on you, and then trying to break through that. I'm not putting words in your mouth, but that's what I'm hearing. And I think I had that too, or have that. I mean, even as you're a business owner trying to create a business, and you have the weight of your family and the pressures of trying to succeed, the people that are working with you and for you, the pressures that you have on that, and those pressures that you've built up, over time as you were a young child, growing up and having pressures of being an athlete, whether an elite athlete or an athlete that was better, and putting those pressures on you, and then have other people say things about you, and that even adds to the pressure, because then that gets into your head about what you are, who you are as a person, and then that you're better, or you're as good, or you could be better, and that you work harder. And it's interesting, you talked about athletes moving at a high speed. For me, that pressure of moving at a high speed is the easy part. That's easy for me to move at a high speed, to work out hard, to play hard, to do things hard. It's the things when you put those expectations on other people where I really had to slow down and think, okay, I can't do that, because I need to be mindful of the situation. I'm me. And it took me a while to learn about those pressures that I put on myself, to not put those pressures on other people, to not put that, bar of excellence that they needed to get over for me. And that was a long time coming for me to really understand that my kid did not have to be who I was or who I thought I was, right? I needed to let him be him. I needed to let my spouse be her. I needed to let my daughter be her, and be that person who was just there to support them on their journey, not their journey that I thought they should be on. And having those expectations be met from their point of view and not from my point of view, if that made sense at all. So those pressures that I put on myself growing up, and you feel it, I think, from my father. I didn't feel it from my mother, but I know I felt it from my father, and he didn't really do much, but it was enough. It's crazy how much that pressure can get to you when it doesn't have to be much. And that's the thing that I'm now learning from, is being so mindful of the words and the actions that I put out there, that I am mindful that they are them and I'm supporting their journey, and to not veer in that off road of pressure that I know was there for me. So that's kind of, that was just a lot there to unpack, but
no, that's but I think you hit the nail on the head. We put, not only do we receive from other people, because, and I'm just kind of summarizing some of what you said that really stood out to me. And then I'd love to hear Bill's side of this, because, Bill and Kim, you guys, are coaches right now, right? Like, there are so many pressures that we can face externally, and just sometimes these internal pressures, suddenly we start projecting onto other people for things here and there. And so there's just so much that stood out to me, but obviously I do want to hear, Bill, I'd like to hear your opinion on the expectations we set of others. Cause and bringing this up to you, like, as a coach, and Kim, I want to get your thoughts on this too. Like, you have to have some form of expectation for your athletes, right? Like there's a way we do things here, right? And there's an expectation that you kind of have to set. There's something that you have to set as like a North Star in some way, shape, or form, right? Like, how do you balance the two sides of this is an expectation and it causes people to rise to the occasion, be better, be disciplined, all this other stuff. And then that, and the other side of it being creating unnecessary pressure on somebody, because that's just team sports. You have to have expectations from player to coach and coach to player. Like, what's the balance look like, Bill?
Yeah, I love the framing of the question. And I guess for me, I know I would have benefited so much more in college if I would have understood the importance of others with that pressure, meaning, yes, you have to, from an individual perspective, I think showing up is so important. Are you on time? You're putting forth your best effort, those types of things. I think the functioning of the team, the pressure is, can they really be connected with one another, which allows for, that fluid movement in championship seasons and in championship runs. And you can read the dynamics of your group. And if a teammate needs to be pulled along with you or lifted up, you can recognize it before it becomes a problem. From that, I think that's where that pressure goes from so individual focused. Can I make a free throw? Can I make a kick? To, do we really understand what we're all moving towards here? And when those things begin to be connected as a coach, I think that's, whether it's an install of defense or it's basketball, whatever the sport, when you can get your players and the team to understand the why behind their job, that does result in W's. There's no doubt. It looks good on film. There's no doubt. But the beauty is, what people don't see is the harmony that you've created. I think that's the best part of the pressure.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Kim, I do want to get your thoughts on this. And Michael, I do want to come over to you with this topic.
So there's a couple things that resonate with me in this one. One, when you're asking me as an individual with the expectations and pressure and, I was kind of not the golden child, unlike Michael, as far as the expectation. I was more the black sheep. I had to hide who I was in many ways because of being gay. I couldn't be the person that I wanted to be up until the time I got into college. And I didn't come out to my mom until I was 24. So to have to live two lives. And I remember coming out to my mom and she said, it was like a death of a dream to know that my daughter was a lesbian. And I said, you know what? I had to let go of that dream when I was about 12 years old, that I would never live up to this expectation that you had of me to get married, have kids, blah, 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 blah. That's not the life that I could lead or live because, again, marriage was not legal at the time when I came out. I came out over 30 years ago. So there was that pressure and expectation. Now, fast forward 30 plus years, right? And I've coached for 15. And when you talk about laying the groundwork of expectation, it's also laying the groundwork of buy-in for the team and inviting the players and the individuals to say, yes, I'm going to do my best effort individually for the best betterment of the team and the achievement of the goals for the team itself. And so being able to create that buy-in and create a system where players feel welcome to share their concerns, their expectations of the team themselves. And then my job is to hold them accountable to those goals and expectations that they say they want to achieve. So when you get the buy-in from the player and then holding them accountable, I'll show up early. I'll show up prepared. I'll bring all my equipment. I'll be here. I'll match you where you're at. And when you guys don't do that, I'm going to hold you accountable to it. And so I think that those things of being able to be individual and defining who you are, just like Michael and I have done, right, in our own ways differently. And then getting the buy-in from the players now that we're in the role of being the adult, and I think that that's, the powerful thing of parenting, Morgan, that you're addressing yourself of like, holy shit, I can't put this on my kids. I've got to do this differently. It's not your life to lead, it's theirs. So I know I went over on that, but I think that I needed to hit both pieces.
We're getting into some relatively heavy things that I unexpectedly just realized, but I love it. So yeah, we're
We
going
have
to be
societal
very
expectations that get manifest through our families. So I think
100%.
it's important to understand that we can't take our lived experiences away. We each, all five of us, have very distinct, different experiences, and they're valid.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, Michael, obviously, being a college athlete, having been an athlete, but now you do training with people, right? And you have a company that you run, but you also have athletes who you work with. Like, there's a lot of like, you felt pressure, but you also have to be able to set expectations when you're kind of in that switch role. How do you balance that stuff?
I think for me, I balance it by seeing what expectations I actually want to live up to. So, for example, what Kim just spoke, she did not want to live up to the expectation of being a straight married woman. That wasn't her expectation, so I don't have to live up to it because I don't want to. It's understanding what expectations that others put on you, and if you don't want to live up to it, you don't have to. That's what a lot of people do, is expectations are put on them, and they feel like they have to live up to that expectation. But if you can balance that, understand what you truly want, who you really are, then those expectations others put on you doesn't really matter because it doesn't align with who you are as a person. I think that's how I've gotten better and growing as a person as I go on in life. As I almost to a sense stop expecting things from people, because one, if I expect too much, I usually end up getting disappointed because no one can live up to my standard because I'm me and no one else can be me. No one else can live in my shoes. It took me a while to realize that my life is mine to live and their life is there to live. I can't put them to my expectations, my level, because that's impossible. No one can be in my shoes. But there's these impossible expectations we put on others. Like, oh, well, they have to do it this way, that way. But they're not wired like that. So we have to lower our expectations. And on top of that, for us, when people put expectations on us, we have to understand if we don't want to carry that expectation, we don't have to. It's our life to live, not theirs. If they don't like it, who cares? They can deal with it later. But I'm going to live my life to the fullest how I want to live it. If you don't like that, it is what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, from my perspective, when it comes to the balance between pressure and expectations, I mean, it's one of those things where I believe all pressure comes from bad expectations or not so great expectations. But not all expectations lead to pressure. And the difference for me is when you can set an expectation for yourself that is more discipline or behaviorally based. Like, I have an expectation that I'm going to be a kind person. I have expectations that I'm going to be honest. I have expectations that I'm going to hold myself accountable. When you can define these behavioral disciplines for yourself and have those be your expectations, rather than I have an expectation that I'm going to get 100% on every single test that I've ever taken in school, or that you get a perfect SAT or ACT, or that you score 6 touchdowns a game, or that you're this and this. When you set that kind of stuff, that's what puts you in a box, because you are setting one way to win, one way to lose, and you are defining a very specific way that you have to be perfect. And you're completely tossing aside the fact that you're a human being. But when you go into the behavioral side, it leaves room for numerical imperfections, because the things you can control are more behavioral and discipline based. And when you can control that stuff, and those are the expectations that you set for yourself, then it starts to eliminate pressure. Like, you think of, and this is probably a great segue into maybe one of the next things that I'd like to talk about. Like, when there are things that are just outside of your control, the only things that you can control is what you think, what you say, what you do. And when you can control those things really well, a lot of really good things happen. I mean, you think of the NBA finals right now. You can't say, if you're Steph Curry, I have to score 50 points a night or else I'm going to lose, right? Like, he may be able to do it. He can sure as hell shoot enough threes to be able to give himself a shot. But whether or not those things go in, he may or may not have 100% control over. But he can say, I can be a communicative leader. I can give a ton of effort. I can always be willing to make an extra pass. I can always be willing to, I can not talk back to refs, right? Like, those are all behavioral things that you as an athlete can do. And the same thing goes in the business world. I cannot talk back to my boss. I can make sure that I put in my time and get certain things done. I can make sure that I'm always asking questions if I don't know what I'm doing, right? Behavioral stuff that removes pressure. But there are a lot of things that we don't control. And I want to talk a little bit about, and this is a fun term that I first learned when I was in high school. My coach used it all the time, is sudden change drills. When you're talking about, like, from football, an interception, a fumble recovery, pick, whatever, like, right. There are sudden change moments that happen in all sorts of, in every sport that you can think of. And these sudden change moments sometimes cause you to naturally be in a reactive state. And as we can all probably agree here, when you're reactive, you take a back seat and you try and figure out what's going on. What do I do about this? And things are starting to happen to you. And the goal is to try and be back in control as fast as you can, which means controlling what you can control. So my question here is, the sudden change pressure that can come from life and how we deal with it, and how to come out on top, is this next topic that I want to dive into. So when it comes to sudden change things that we don't control, Michael, I do want to come to you on this first. You grew an extra bone, my man. It's not like you can control that, but you can control what you do when that kind of stuff happens. There are so many athletes that are out there that have these external things just happen and create different circumstances. What are some of the most important things that an athlete, or someone who's no longer an athlete, you can pick either or, as life is happening around you, some things just are outside of your control. What are things that you can do to be able to perform better during these quote unquote sudden change moments?
See, that's a lot to unpack, but I'll hone in on one thing. When it comes to really being able to bounce back, one thing an athlete always has that we will forever have, especially at the elite level, we're able to adapt. We're the best at adapting. No one adapts better than us. When you talk about the reactive state, we react quick because that's what we do. It happens in games all the time. When bullets are flying, interception, pick six, whatever happens, the gameplay doesn't go how we figured. We adapt quick. So when it comes to that, even for me, when I had my injury, it was tough for me to figure out what to do, but I ended up going back to my natural instincts of adapting. It's like, all right, this is done for me. I have to figure something else out. So I went to go intern at places. I just went to go network because I figured out that being an athlete, everyone gravitates to us anyway, so I might as well use it. So use that adaptability that we have to control what we can control. As we know, everything is not under our control, but you said our emotions, our thoughts, all those things we can control. But we forget sometimes that of who we are when, like in the game time, we know we're the best of the best. We know, okay, I got this. But we forget when life hits us and we come outside the field, outside of the court, outside of the pool, wherever it may be, we go into the real world. We forget who we were in our mindset. We were built to adapt. We were built to be resilient. That's what comes with being an athlete. We even go into the business world. That's what we do. That's why companies look to hire athletes first. Because I know if I get an athlete, he will adapt or she will adapt, and they will do what it takes to come out on top. So just remembering that part of the athlete and athletic identity, that adaptability piece that we have in us, always remember that. You get nervous. Of course, there's things you fear. You get butterflies for every game, but we push through it. The same thing in life. We're going to get nervous, but life is all about adaptability. No one has everything figured out. If they say they do, they're lying to your face. They just know how to adapt quicker than you, and they know how to overcome fear. They face fear head on. So when you're in these situations, if you're an athlete that is playing or not playing, and you're fearful of it, you got to face it head on, because if you don't, it will crush you. Just know that you could adapt to anything because you're doing it your whole life. So that's what I did. That's how I got to where I am.
Absolutely. Morgan, how can people adapt to change that's outside of their control better and perform better?
Michael gave some great examples. For me, adapting is a mindfulness practice. What helped me and is helping me is breathing and being mindful of the moment, because that helps me control my emotions and control my feelings. Because like you guys were talking about, the only thing we can control is what we are and how we react to certain things. And being able to adapt, like Michael was talking about, being able to hold yourself accountable, but also be able to create that change when you're moving forward, when you're moving into a situation like speaking engagements. It's interesting. My family's like, are you going to get nervous for that? No, you know what? It's interesting that I don't get nervous. I handle that pressure well because I realize, I'm prepared for it. We talk about preparation, but I also know it's going to be over. You know, this isn't defining me. This isn't who I am. This is something I'm doing, right? We talk as an athlete. It's not define you. It's what you do. And those are the things that I like to think about when I'm in the moment is, okay, how am I going to get through this? What am I doing? How am I doing this? What is happening at the moment? And then be just going through it. And then when you're at the other side, you're like, okay, you know, that wasn't so bad, or that wasn't, you know, I tell my kids all the time that, you know, it's worse in their head than it is in real life, you know, and that's a lot about what happens when we are sometimes in our own head. You know, I talk about it a lot with my kids too. And not only is it they get in their own way, but that's the thing too. They're getting in their own way of stopping themselves from being adaptable, to moving forward and to thinking about things in a different way and calming down and taking breaths, being mindful, realizing that, you know, the situation isn't as bad as you think it is, because you're ready for this, you're prepared for this, or you've adapted to this in a way that makes you be able to perform in that moment. And then you come out the other side, and then you can reflect, and then you can look back, but you've made it. And that helps me, is understanding that I'm going to get through this. I'm going to get to the other side, and then I can reflect. But while I'm there in a situation, whether I'm in a meeting, I'm on a Zoom call, or I'm talking in a presentation, I'm in that moment, and I'm mindful of what I'm doing, and that helps me.
100%. Bill, how can you adapt to change that's outside of your control and perform better?
Yeah, I enjoyed listening to you guys, you know, the input. I think, you know, Michael, you brought it up, and we, or Keegan, you might have too, the sudden change, you know, period of your practice. We call it FTS period for us, which for this show, we'll just say, forget that stuff. You can fill in FTS in your own world. But that's our mindset when we run on the field, right? You know, forget that stuff. I've got my, you know, I understand why we've practiced this drill. I can get laser focused on my key, my read, and then I just go play. And, you know, I think being able to apply that in real life, you know, there's a lot of things where FTS can serve you well. If you can get laser focused on, you know, okay, I lost my job after 20 years. I got to get laser focused on how I'm going to take care of my wife and 3 kids. You know, it can be, I had a flat tire on the road, whatever your example. If you could move through that initial reaction, that initial emotion, and get yourself back to that level ground, that balance, then you've got more than a puncher's chance of winning and succeeding. You'll have conquered, in my opinion, that pressure to a degree to move it forward. It might not be perfect, your first step forward, but if you keep that moving it forward mindset and you know kind of how to flush things pretty quickly, I think that's, for me, and my kids get sick of it when they hear me say it, you know, are you solution focused or are you problem focused right now? So
I thought you were going to say my kids are tired of me saying it, just you dropping F-bombs and all the four-letter words with FTS.
It's not August yet. We got plenty of time before camp starts. Be mellow right now.
Just picturing Bill just screaming on the sideline, just all the 4-letter words to these kids. Oh my gosh, I love it. Kim, how can athletes better adapt to change that's outside of their control?
I think that obviously this brings my therapy hat into play for me, my old career. But there's a couple questions that I do with my kids. Like, if, you know, I'll ask them how they're doing, and then I read their, like, most people, hey, how are you? Oh, I'm fine, I'm good. And it's just, you move on with the day and you take them at face value. And one of the things that I've done with my kids that I coach, they're all teenagers, they're under the age of 18, but I coach predominantly 13 to 18-year-olds. That's my wheelhouse, both boys and girls. But the past 3 years have been girls. And I'm like, your face doesn't say that. Should I believe you? And it gives them an opportunity for them to address whatever elephant is in their head at the moment. And it really is, the teenage emotions are brutal. They're brutal, male or female. And the one thing that we also have to remember, collegiate athletes are still kids in their brains. Their brains are not fully developed until you're over 25. So if we're taking young people and expecting them to manage things with the depth of emotion and experience that we have now that we're older, we're putting the wrong expectation on them. Giving them the tools to say and acknowledge, hey, something sucks right now, or something at home is terrible right now, or whatever, and getting them to focus on what do you have to do right now in the moment, and get them present and teaching them some of, as Morgan talked about, some of the mindfulness techniques of getting back to center, breathing, taking a second, doing some form of pattern interrupt, right? Doing some form of solution focused anything. I was a solution focused therapist. That was my actual training as a marital and family therapist. That was what I did. And I always use sport to help my kids do better in school, because you have to do a pattern interrupt and get their brain and dopamine and endorphins going so that they're actually receptive to some of the things that they're going to have to do that are really difficult, say learning a subject in school, for example. And when you're in the middle of the heart of a game and all of a sudden you see a player losing their shit, which we all witness because we've been there too, we have to do the pattern interrupt for them. We cannot expect every single player to learn how to do this just by one opportunity. We have to be teachers of those emotions and practice what we preach. And I think it's very important to show, if we lose our cool as the adult on the sideline, that we address that with the kids too. And that we say, hey, I need to rein it in a little bit. I wasn't very adaptable in that moment. I've got to show you and practice this myself. I think that's really important, to be really real. And I think we've forgotten some of that. Sometimes we can talk in textbook all day long. We can talk about all these things and all the resilient stuff, and let's do mindfulness, but put it into practice, which is, you know what, today's a really hard day, blah, 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 blah. I'm not going to go deep on some of the things that we have for time wise with us today, but those things are really important, that our kids see us as human and that we don't hold ourselves to perfectionistic standards, and we show that we're real. That also shows adaptability, that we can sit there and say, hey, I got to learn on this one. I got to grow a little bit more with this one. And I think we have to teach that. Our brains are still growing at that age.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I couldn't agree more with that. And when it comes from my perspective, where adapting to that change that's outside your control, I think it comes with, and I think we've all kind of touched on this a little bit, is that sense of finding a way to come back to a sense of being neutral. A sense of something has happened. How do I hit? Some people hit reset. Some people use the FTS. Flush it, whatever. Any of that stuff. For me, the phrase has been and always will be, I'm just starting. Right. So something happens. You have a sudden change moment. I have been the guy who, who had a wife with a baby on the way. I'm the breadwinner, and I lose my job. Right. And sudden change, didn't see it coming, happened at the drop of a hat type of thing. It happened day after my birthday. Right. So you don't see these things coming. You're coming off of a high, and in telling myself, it took us some time, but when I finally started to wake up and tell myself I'm just starting, it immediately started to remove pressure from my world, and be able to get back to neutral. And this whole mindset of being neutral and being in a position where you're not getting too energetically charged one way or another, it allows you to be a lot more analytical, allows you to just take things into account and figure out what you want to do. And sometimes a neutral mindset is one of the most powerful things that a human being can do, is because you can sit there and rationalize what has been and what you want to do next, right? You understand where you are, and you understand what you want to do with the situation at hand. It's a very, very powerful tool that a lot of people have. So I want to before we do any closing thoughts or any of that other stuff, I think one thing that's really interesting that Michael does is, obviously Michael helps athletes now leverage their sport, leverage their their status as an athlete in the collegiate level, because we all know, and we talked about this, I think it was last time or potentially the time before, where it's like 1% of all people from college make it to the pros, and the rest of everybody else who plays in the college arena, they may not have a journey, right? So one of the things that Michael does is obviously serve that group of athlete to figure out, well, really all athletes, but especially that athlete, to allow them to be able to remove the pressures of life after sports by helping them leverage some of their status and all these other things to make really good decisions. And I would like for all of us to ask Michael kind of a question about some of these things, because you're dealing with this stuff on really a daily basis as your profession. And so one thing I'm really curious about, and I'll kind of open it up. What do you see with current athletes in college? What do you see as some of the biggest pressures that they deal with that you are going in and you are specifically helping them on? Like, what do you think is the biggest one or two things that they're dealing with when it comes to some of the work that you do? And what are some of like the very general high level ways in which you're trying to address some of these things?
Yeah, I think the biggest pressure that I've seen is the culture. So what I mean by the culture is pretty much everybody else except the athlete. So that's the media, students, sometimes staff. They expect us to be these superhumans that we can't make a mistake, shut up and dribble. You can't do this. You can't do that. You don't get hurt. You don't feel sad. You don't feel angry. Any of these things. You have to be perfect at all times. So now, me being an athlete, I feel like I have to be perfect the whole time. I can't show weakness at all, because if I do, I'm looked at as a weak person. All these other things I see, but the culture has shifted to where an athlete has to be perfect at all times, especially with social media. There's always a lens and a microscope on us. One sudden movement, everything can crumble. So what I'm trying to tell these athletes is that you're human.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay to not be okay. No one is perfect. It is impossible to be perfect. These expectations we were talking about prior is what other people put on you. And most of the time, these people who put expectations on you have never stepped foot on the field or the court ever. They're living for what they see off the lights and cameras. They don't understand this life. So you cannot expect someone that doesn't understand your life to live your life and throw these expectations on you. We're giving people credit and taking what they're saying to heart when it doesn't even matter, because they haven't lived in this world. And a lot of things people try to tell, especially with, I may say this, but most people don't believe it's like the mental health stigma, like the mental health awareness. People who are diving into that for the monetary reasons have never stepped foot in those buildings of being an athlete. So you're trying to tell me what my mental health is when you have no idea what I'm going through. So you telling me some of these things don't even equate to me, or you diagnose me super fast when you don't understand that I'm resilient enough, I can get through this. You can't just throw, all right, yeah, you're depressed. I wasn't depressed until you just told me I was depressed. I was completely fine. I was just going through a period, but now you threw it to where I'm stuck. So now what I do is make sure these athletes realize it's okay to not be okay. Life is hard. When you figure out who you are, it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be rainbows. My message is not rainbows, because that's unrealistic. Life is going to be tough. You're forever growing. But through that, you have to know, 1, you're going to make mistakes. 2, you're a human. 3, it's going to be okay. It's only going to be okay when you focus on yourself and figure out who you are.
Shoo! Good Lord, way to break open this Q&A session, Michael. Holy crap. I feel like you were just talking to a 19-year-old me. Oh my gosh, that was awesome. Okay. Well, hey, who's got a question for Michael here?
I'm gonna just jump on Michael's bandwagon because he just threw it into my wheelhouse, and I can't let it go.
Yes,
Bill, you want me to talk? Bill's probably looking over there going, "Oh man, what's Morgan gonna say?"
I know, and I turned off the timer, so
I know.
dangerous move.
Michael's probably going.
Timer all night.
I know. Yeah, he used it a couple times on me. Michael's probably wondering, "Oh, what's Morgan gonna say?" Man. I got a business, Michael, that talks exactly your talk. Bill works with me. I mean, I might go on 30 minutes here. I don't know how much time we have. But the point of what you're saying is exactly what we're building and what we talk about with colleges and universities, being where it's cultural. You can have and I talk about mindfulness because it's a tool you have to use, because being mindful, having meditation, having that practice to help you understand that I can get through this moment is absolutely necessary to be able to understand your mindset and to be able to control yourself, because, things come at you and we react faster emotionally than we do with our thoughts. Mm-hmm. That's just something as humans that we've had to deal with over time, because we have to run when that tiger is coming after us. So we have to react emotionally before we can, think about it. Oh, the tiger's coming. We're already dead. So that has not left us. So we have to understand how to control those emotions and be mindful and be able to say, okay, I need to breathe because she's just asking me to take out the garbage. She's not asking me to do everything, right? But what we're talking about is that mindfulness moment and those things that you're learning to breathe and understand your emotions. That won't get you through that cultural situation, through that toxic situation where that environment continues to beat you down, whether you're marginalized, whether you're, stigmatized, or whether you talk about, the stigma of mental health. Well, I don't want to talk to somebody because they don't look like me. They don't talk like me. They don't understand me. They don't know where I'm coming from, just like what you were talking about. And that's absolutely what we're showing and what we're seeing is that it's the culture that people are in, whether it's that crappy coach or that abusive coach or, that sexual abusive doctor that's been going on for decades, and you've been talking about it to somebody, but they're not listening to you because you're in that culture of disgust and disdain and somebody that's just trying to get money and all those things. Michael, man, I literally could go on for half an hour, exactly what you're talking about, because we talk about these expectations that, the people put on us. And yes, we put on these expectations on ourselves, but where do we get those expectations from? It's from the people around us, right? And that's the things that we need to talk about and understand as a culture and be able to say, okay, there's some shit that's going on around there that we can fix, whether it's inclusion and belonging, whether it's safety, whether it's fairness, whether it's support that you're getting or you're not getting. All those things can happen to student athletes, and then you've got relationships and you've got exams and you've got the study, and then you've got those expectations that your parents are putting on you, and you've got home situations that are happening. There's so many things going on around us that are cultural and that are environmental that we need to deal with from a society and even from a community or school or campus level, where we can get a lot of people on board because there's things out there that can help that and not only give those those resources to the student athletes, but also to the community leaders that can help them understand those cultural things that are bothering the students, to be able to help them even better, because we see those suicides time and time again. I brought it up before when we talked one time in the podcast a while ago. We were talking about Stanford. I'll just bring up Stanford because it's in the news. 4 suicides in 13 months. 4 in 13 months.
Stanford this year. 15 at Stanford this year.
And that is crazy, right? And you're thinking, okay, what? And then what does Stanford say? They say we're going to put more resources into it. Stanford didn't have enough resources to begin with? Come on. Of course they did, right? So it's not a resource thing. It's a culture thing. What's happening to our young people, right? So I know that was long, Keegan. You let me go, but I couldn't let Michael go without jumping on his back and being just
is clearly happening between Michael and Morgan here. You guys,
I had to get on his back and pat him, and just like I wanted to hug him, I want to grab him and shake him around a little bit.
Oh,
he's speaking my language with that one.
Absolutely. No, and that's it's such a deep topic, right? When you talk about culture, when you talk about because Michael, you're 100% correct. The culture of whatever team you're a part of, and it's either defined as, hey, this is the way that we do things around here, or this is the way you're supposed to act around here, which are two completely different things. You can walk into a building, and because Morgan, you were talking about running away from the tiger when it gets emotional, so I'm going to bring up like LSU, right? Coach Orgeron is that tiger, right? And so, and I'm not even going to try and say go Tigers as Coach O, because my voice doesn't go that deep. But when you're like, if you go there, there's a way that they do things, and there's a way that those student athletes have to behave, right? It's part of the culture in a whole bunch of different ways. And that's just one example. This happens everywhere. Doesn't matter where you're at. It could happen in high school. It could happen in middle school. It could happen in college, in the pros. There's ways that you act and ways that you behave that obviously that you're held to, from like here's a clear cut, here's how we do things. But then there's all that, the cultural stuff. When someone walks up to you and you have to act like you're superhuman and perfect and all these different things. So, and I'm going to turn this into a question, Michael, is when they're dealing with those pressures of culture, what's one of the main ways that when you're an athlete and you're dealing with this culture, because there's only one of you, and there's so many other college athletes out there, and just athletes as a whole, when they're dealing with the pressure that culture can present to an athlete, what's one of the ways, just one, I know there's probably a billion, what's one way that they can start to break out from that and actually start to write their own sense of culture?
I'll say what I did for me is very small, but it helped me so much. Is I got off social media for either one day or for an hour, because the culture stems from the media, and people follow what the media do. That's how media works. That's how mass media. That's how they make money. So if I'm looking at that all the time, I want to do nothing but compare and contrast myself to other people and what they do. But when I detach myself from that and I have to look myself in the mirror and understand who I am, what I want, then I can start working on myself. If I look in the mirror and I don't like who I see, then I know I have some work to do. If I look in the mirror and realize I've been trying to be someone else my whole life because of what the media and culture has shown me, then I see I have some work to do. So what I did is I got off social media for a little bit. You need a detox, because if you don't, especially nowadays, you'll just keep going deeper and deeper and deeper. And then the culture ends up shaping you rather than you shaping yourself. You have to take time to shape you, because not the media will shape you. However, they do it now with athletes now. They create the perfect athlete, the person you want to see, and that's what they live off. We have to get away from that. We have to get away from the numbers. We have to get away from external and focus on internal. Nowadays, I feel like people are too focused on the numbers, the stats, all that stuff. And we, as athletes, feel like numbers instead of human. So we got to get away from that, detach ourselves from that. Go outside for a walk. Just go walk. Mm-hmm. Go breathe. Go listen to some music. Do something that is not on media, that you are just with yourself and you can enjoy yourself for a little bit. Then we can talk about it going on from there. But you have to just live with yourself for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Couldn't have said it better if I tried. I mean, Michael, this has been, I have one final comment, I guess. Not necessarily a question, but really just saying thanks for being here, man. Like, this has been incredible. The work that you do. And we talked about this. Like I said, anybody who hasn't listened to the podcast episode with Michael Willet on the Unstoppable Mindset podcast, episode 106, where we dive into kind of the origin story of how a lot of this stuff happens for where you're at right now, Michael. I mean, the stuff you're talking about and the expertise you have and what you're helping athletes with, none of this is by accident. You've set yourself out on a path, on a purpose to be the person you wish that you had, as so many other athletes try and do, and sometimes fall a little bit short with. But, you know, this is your purpose, man. Like, that you help athletes find ways to not have to wait till the game is over for them to figure things out and be able to perform better in all these different aspects, including outside of sports. And I would love to, while anybody else thinks of any final comments, questions, other stuff like that, I'd love for you to, you know, just share where people can obviously connect with you, find you, follow you, and Walk On Nation as a whole, and be in touch if that's something that they're interested in.
Definitely. First off, I just want to thank you all for having me on this. It was a great time. I had a blast and some great conversations. I appreciate all of you in the room. Where to find me, there's walk on _nation, Instagram and Twitter, walkonnation.org on that contact page. You can reach out. I'm on LinkedIn, Michael Willet. Find me there. I'm open for conversation. If there's any athletes listening to this that have a question, it is my job to get back to you. I will get back to you. I will make sure. If there's any question you have, any thoughts, comments, concerns, quorums, whatever it may be, I'm here to help. That's my job. I'm not here for the monetary. I'm here to serve you. So that's where you can find me. Once again, I thank you all for having me on. I had a blast.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, man. It was good to get to know you a little bit and hearing your story a little bit and hearing your journey and what you're doing. So thank you for being here.
Definitely.
Okay. Any other final comments, questions for our man Michael before he's on the East Coast? This man has been probably up since the butt crack of dawn, and we have him here past his bedtime. So any other comments, questions?
I'm just happy to see you again, Michael. You and I had a really great conversation the other day, and I mean, you're definitely a leader by action, and I love that. So bravo.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
You bet.
I mean, I'm on the East Coast too, Keegan. What the hell?
Yours was self-imposed, Morgan. We'd have been off 20 minutes
We've been
ago.
doing this. Yeah,
I got the game to watch. I was up at 5 a.m. You know what? I get zero respect on this show. I don't even know why I'm here.
you are here by choice. You've been on these episodes. You know how it goes.
Morgan.
You forced Michael to join this. I said, please come on and save us from Morgan from talking for too long.
It's hilarious.
Good
No,
stuff.
this has been a ton of fun. Anybody who's listening to this, as always, come find us on. This is streaming over to Facebook at Lamar Coaching, LinkedIn, and also YouTube. Obviously, we all share out these episodes afterwards. Watch any of the other episodes. If you have questions for Michael, put them in any comment section where you found this this episode, whether it is on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, or you can send an email. My email is always open. I know everybody here is always very open. Connect with us on LinkedIn. I always share out my email on most of my podcast episodes, which is just Keegan@lamarcoaching.com. Let me know if you have questions for Michael, or just go connect with him directly. If you'd like to have him back on, I'm sure at some point we absolutely will, especially as football season starts coming back around, to just chop it up a little bit. But otherwise, this has been tremendous. Absolutely love it. And, a huge thanks to everybody else here, Kim, Bill, Morgan, as always. This is such a pleasure. And Michael, once again, thank you so much for being here, man.
Thank you. I had a blast. Thank you so much, everyone. I appreciate it.
Thank you.